Maple Hills had always been the kind of neighborhood where people moved to put down roots. The streets lined with mature oak trees provided dappled shade in summer, while the well-maintained colonial and craftsman homes created a picture-perfect suburban landscape. My Aunt Sarah had lived here for 15 years, the last 5 of which had been after losing her sight to a degenerative condition. Her modest blue 2-story with white trim stood as a testament to her fierce independence. I still remember the day she brought Buddy home from the guide dog training center. The golden retriever with soulful brown eyes and impeccable training immediately transformed her life. Before Buddy, Sarah relied heavily on family members and the occasional volunteer service. After Buddy, she reclaimed her independence one confident step at a time. He guided her through the neighborhood streets with perfect precision, helped her navigate the local shops, and became her constant companion. Buddy was more than just a service animal. He represented freedom for my aunt. Their bond was evident to anyone who saw them together. The subtle communication, the implicit trust, the synchronized movements. Sarah would often tell me that Buddy gave her back the world when darkness took her sight. She maintained her home meticulously with systems she developed for everything from organizing her kitchen to tending her beloved garden of fragrant herbs and flowers. The Maple Hills Homeowners Association had always been present but reasonable. They maintained the community pool, organized the annual block party, and ensured property values remained steady through sensible guidelines. Most residents viewed them as a necessary part of suburban living, neither overly burdensome nor particularly noteworthy. The previous board president, Richard Gonzalez, had run things with a light touch for nearly a decade. Everything changed when Patricia Wilkinson moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago. She quickly positioned herself as concerned about declining standards and ran for HOA president against Richard on a platform of stricter enforcement. People barely paid attention to the election, with only 20% of homeowners bothering to vote. Patricia, who everyone soon came to call Karen behind her back, won by 7 votes. The transformation was immediate and jarring. Violation notices appeared on doors throughout the neighborhood for infractions that had never before warranted attention. Karen patrolled the streets each morning with a clipboard and measuring tape, documenting every infraction with zealous precision. The monthly HOA newsletter tripled in length, filled with new interpretations of existing rules. Sarah remained largely unaware of these changes at first. She went about her daily routine with Buddy at her side, their peaceful rhythm untouched by the growing tension in the community. I visited every other weekend, helping with groceries and reading her mail aloud, including the first HOA violation notice that arrived 3 weeks after Karen took office. It cited improper mailbox height and unauthorized flower varieties in the front garden beds. I found it absurd but handled it quietly, not wanting to worry my aunt with neighborhood politics. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The storm that would soon engulf our lives was brewing, with Karen at its center and my Aunt Sarah unwittingly in its path. The peaceful before was ending, and none of us were prepared for what would follow when an HOA president with unchecked power set her sights on a blind woman and her guide dog. The violations against my Aunt Sarah's property began as minor irritants. First came the notice about her mailbox being 1 inch too low according to HOA standards, a regulation that had existed for years but never been enforced. I spent a Saturday afternoon adjusting it while Sarah sat on the porch with Buddy, telling me about the birds she could hear in the nearby trees. 2 weeks later, another notice arrived citing hedges that exceeded the maximum allowable height by ½ an inch. The precision of these measurements suggested someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to find fault. Again, I came over and trimmed the shrubs while silently fuming at the pettiness of it all. Sarah remained gracious. These rules must exist for a reason. she said, ever the optimist. "I want to be a good neighbor." The third notice focused on the color of her mailbox, claiming the shade of navy blue was not on the approved color palette. This had been the same mailbox for a decade, painted during a community beautification project when Richard was HOA president. The selective enforcement was becoming obvious, but I simply repainted it the approved shade of blue, which was virtually indistinguishable from the original. Our first direct encounter with Corinne came on a mild spring morning. I was visiting for the weekend and accompanying Sarah and Buddy on their morning walk. The golden retriever moved with practiced precision, guiding my aunt around obstacles with gentle stops and subtle directional changes. His harness, clearly marked as a service animal, gleamed in the morning light. Corinne appeared from her driveway as we passed, clipboard already in hand. She wore pressed khaki pants and a polo shirt embroidered with HOA President over the pocket. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of Buddy. "Good morning," Sarah called out pleasantly, having heard the sound of footsteps nearby. Buddy remained perfectly still at her side, as he was trained to do during greetings. "You must be Patricia," I said, extending my hand. "I am James, Sarah's nephew." Corinne ignored my outstretched hand, taking a noticeable step backward. "That dog should be on a standard leash, not just that harness," she said, her gaze fixed on Buddy. "This is a guide dog harness," I explained, keeping my voice even. "Buddy is a certified service animal." "Service animal or not, the HOA has rules about proper animal restraint," Corinne replied coolly. She physically recoiled when Buddy shifted his weight, despite the dog making no move toward her. "The Americans with Disabilities Act specifically addresses service animals," Sarah interjected politely. "Buddy has special training and equipment appropriate to his work." Corinne pursed her lips. "I will need to review the bylaws," she said before walking away, making a wide berth around Buddy as if he might suddenly attack. The incident left a sour taste, but worse was to come. The following week, Sarah received a formal notice about animal waste management concerns on her property. This was particularly offensive given how meticulous she was about this aspect of Buddy's care. I had personally installed a specific disposal system in her backyard, and Sarah had developed a routine for keeping her property immaculate. The monthly HOA meeting revealed the undercurrent of discrimination becoming more overt. Sarah insisted on attending after I told her about the mounting violations. With Buddy guiding her, she took a seat near the back of the community center meeting room. Neighbors greeted her warmly, many stopping to pet Buddy after asking permission. Corinne called the meeting to order and methodically worked through agenda items until reaching new business. Her voice took on a different tone as she addressed hygiene concerns regarding animals in the community. "While we understand some residents have special circumstances," Corinne said, her gaze fixed pointedly at Sarah, "we must consider the community impact of animals, particularly regarding cleanliness and potential health hazards." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Sarah sat with perfect posture, her face a mask of dignity despite the obvious targeting. Buddy lay calmly at her feet, the embodiment of professional training and good behavior. Not a single resident spoke in support of Corinne's thinly veiled attack, but neither did anyone openly challenge her. The silence itself was a form of complicity that would later haunt many of our neighbors. As we left the meeting, Sarah gripped my arm tightly. "It is going to get worse before it gets better," she whispered, her intuition proving far more acute than my own. By early summer, the situation had deteriorated beyond mere violation notices. Whispers began circulating through Maple Hills about Buddy allegedly showing aggressive behavior. Mrs. Petrovich from 2 doors down pulled me aside one day to tell me that Corinne had been asking if anyone had ever felt threatened by the large dog roaming the neighborhood. A ridiculous characterization of a professionally trained guide dog who never left Sarah's side. I told her that dog is a saint, Mrs. Petrovich assured me, her Eastern European accent growing stronger with indignation. I said to her, that dog has better manners than most people in this neighborhood. Despite such defenses, the rumors persisted. Sarah began noticing subtle changes in how some neighbors interacted with her, conversations cut short, parents pulling children away when they approached to ask about petting Buddy. The isolation tactics were working on at least some of the community. Then came the anonymous note. Sarah found it when her hand brushed against the paper while checking for mail. Not being able to read it, she called me immediately. I drove over that evening and read her the typed message. Warning: dangerous animal penalties include fines up to $1,000 and mandatory removal. Control your animal or face consequences. Sarah's hands trembled as I read the words aloud. Buddy sensed her distress and placed his head on her lap, a gesture that had always comforted her. "This is getting serious, James," she said quietly. "Buddy has never harmed anyone. He is trained not to react even under provocation." That night, we made a decision. The next day, I contacted a security company that specialized in discrete systems for vulnerable clients. Within 48 hours, Sarah's property was equipped with motion-activated cameras covering all approaches to the house, the yard, and the street view. The system included audio capability and night vision, with footage accessible via a secure app that both Sarah and I could monitor. "Is this really necessary?" Sarah asked as the technician finished the installation. "I hope not," I replied, "but better to have evidence if anything happens." We did not have to wait long. 3 days after the system was installed, motion alerts triggered while Sarah was at her monthly ophthalmologist appointment. I checked the footage on my phone and watched in disbelief as Corinne walked deliberately up to Sarah's property, wearing gloves and carrying a small bag. She proceeded to measure the height of the grass with a ruler, taking photographs with her phone. But what happened next left me speechless. Corinne removed something from her bag, dog waste, and carefully placed it near the side garden where Buddy had his designated relief area. She took more photos, then left quickly, removing her gloves as she walked away. When Sarah returned home, I drove over immediately with my laptop. We sat at her kitchen table as I described the footage in detail, then played it so she could hear Corinne's movements and self-congratulatory muttering about finally having proof of violations. "She planted evidence," Sarah said, her voice hollow with disbelief. "She is framing Buddy to build a case against him." We reviewed the footage from previous days and discovered this was not the first such visit. Corinne had been inspecting the property during Sarah's predictable absences, her weekly grocery delivery time, her standing hair appointment, her medical visits. On 2 occasions, she had scattered garden debris across the walkway and taken photos before leaving. The most disturbing discovery came from footage taken at dawn one morning. Corinne appeared at the edge of the property, used a stick to push over one of Sarah's rose bushes, took photographs of the damage, then left. The next day, Sarah received a violation notice for landscape neglect resulting in hazardous conditions. As we sat reviewing all this evidence, Sarah's hand found mine across the table. "I never thought someone could hate like this," she said softly. Her unseeing eyes brimmed with tears not of fear or sadness, but of righteous anger. Buddy sat alert at her feet, unaware he had become the target of such calculated malice. "We have the evidence now," I assured her. "If she escalates, we can take this to the police." Sarah nodded slowly. Something tells me she will not stop at property violations, James. There is a cruelty here that frightens me. The security cameras had revealed the truth behind the harassment campaign, but they had also revealed something darker about human nature. How power, even the small power of an HOA presidency, could corrupt and twist a person until they became capable of targeting a blind woman and her service animal. We had evidence now, but neither of us realized how critical that evidence would soon become, nor how quickly Karen would escalate beyond merely planting garden debris and false violations. Sunday mornings in Maple Hills had always been peaceful. The neighborhood moved at a slower pace, with many families attending church or enjoying lazy brunches. This particular Sunday in early autumn brought crisp air filled with the scent of wood smoke from the first fireplace lightings of the season. Leaves had begun their transformation, splashing the tree-lined streets with bursts of gold and amber. I had stayed overnight at Sarah's after we spent Saturday evening watching, or in her case, listening to old movies. She had been more tense than usual that week, admitting that she felt watched and uncomfortable in her own home. I suggested a morning walk might help clear her mind. Buddy seemed eager for the exercise, bringing his harness to Sarah as soon as she mentioned the word walk. Sarah moved through her preparation routine with practiced efficiency. She secured Buddy's guide harness, checked that his service animal identification was clearly visible, and tapped her pocket to ensure she had waste bags even though we planned a short circuit around the neighborhood. She wore a light blue sweater and comfortable walking shoes, her white cane folded and tucked into her crossbody bag as a backup. "He seems extra alert today," Sarah commented, as Buddy guided her down the front walkway with careful precision. The golden retriever indeed appeared vigilant, his ears perked and eyes scanning their surroundings with professional attention. We had walked about 5 blocks, enjoying the morning quiet and the subtle crunch of early fallen leaves underfoot. Several neighbors waved or called brief greetings, most of them familiar with Sarah and Buddy's regular route. Mrs. Chen from the corner house offered us fresh-baked muffins, which we declined with thanks, promising to stop on our return trip. We were passing Karen's house, a large colonial with aggressive landscaping and no fewer than 3 no trespassing signs, when the front door flew open. Karen emerged wearing gardening gloves and what looked like a uniform, khaki pants, and that same embroidered HOA polo shirt despite it being a weekend. Her hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the tight anger in her expression. "Stop right there," she called out, her voice carrying across her immaculate lawn. Sarah tensed at the sound, and Buddy immediately shifted into a protective stance, standing firmly to provide stability for my aunt. "Good morning, Patricia," Sarah responded calmly, though I felt her free hand grip my arm tightly. "Is everything all right?" Karen marched down her front walk toward us, stopping at the edge of her property. "You know very well everything is not all right," she said, her voice vibrating with barely contained fury. "Your dog destroyed my prize rose bushes last night." I blinked in confusion. "That is impossible. Buddy was inside all night with us." "Do not lie to me," Karen snapped, jabbing a finger in our direction. "I have the proof. My security camera caught a golden retriever digging through my garden at 2 a.m. Those roses were show quality. They cost hundreds of dollars each." Sarah shook her head gently. "Patricia, Buddy is never outside unattended. He sleeps in my bedroom. Perhaps it was another dog that looks similar." "I know what I saw," Karen insisted, stepping onto the public sidewalk now, moving closer to us. Her face had flushed an alarming shade of red, and spittle formed at the corners of her mouth as she spoke. "First the constant mess in your yard, then the property violations, and now this. That animal is a menace to this community." Buddy remained perfectly still beside Sarah, displaying none of the behaviors Karen was describing. His training was evident in how he positioned himself between Sarah and Karen without showing any aggression whatsoever. "We should continue our walk," I suggested quietly to Sarah, placing my hand gently on her elbow to indicate we should move. "Have a good day, Patricia." This attempt to disengage only seemed to enrage Karen further. "Do not walk away from me," she shouted as Sarah and Buddy began to move forward, my aunt's white cane now withdrawn from her bag and extended as additional guidance. "I am the HOA president. You cannot ignore me." What happened next occurred with such shocking swiftness that I struggled later to describe it coherently to the police. Karen, seeing us continuing our walk, stormed toward her rock garden, a decorative arrangement of landscaping stones bordering her flower beds. She seized one of the larger rocks, approximately the size of a softball, and with a grunt of effort hurled it directly at Buddy. The rock struck him on his right flank with a sickening thud. Buddy yelped in pain, momentarily stumbling sideways from the impact. The sudden movement and his instinctive reaction to pain disrupted his guiding position, causing Sarah to lose her balance and orientation. "Buddy, what happened? What is wrong?" Sarah called out in alarm, her white cane clattering to the ground as she reached for her guide dog. Without Buddy's steady presence, she became instantly disoriented on the unfamiliar section of sidewalk. I lunged toward Karen as she reached for another rock, but froze when I heard gasps and shouts from around us. Neighbors had emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Karen stood with another rock clutched in her hand, momentarily paralyzed by the sudden audience. She just threw a rock at a guide dog, called out Mr. Fitzgerald from across the street, his Sunday newspaper still in hand. I saw the whole thing. "Is she crazy?" another voice added from a nearby driveway. Karen's face cycled through emotions, rage, then realization, then a desperate attempt at justification. "The dog lunged at me," she shouted, though at least 6 witnesses had seen Buddy's perfect behavior and her unprovoked attack. I knelt beside Buddy, who was whimpering softly, his training still evident as he tried to return to position despite his injury. Blood matted his golden fur where the rock had struck him, and he favored his right side. Sarah had dropped to her knees beside him, her hands searching to understand what had happened, her unseeing eyes wide with panic and confusion. "Someone call the police," I shouted, looking up at the gathering neighbors, "and we need a vet immediately." The neighborhood that had remained mostly silent during months of Karen's growing tyranny finally found its voice. In attacking a blind woman's guide dog, Karen had crossed a line that no one could ignore. The community's response was about to show her exactly how finished she truly was. Time seemed to both accelerate and stand still in the chaotic minutes following Karen's attack. Blood stained Buddy's golden fur as he whimpered, struggling to maintain his working position despite the pain. Sarah knelt beside him on the sidewalk, her hands gently exploring to assess what had happened, her face a portrait of confusion and distress. "Please, what happened to Buddy? Is he okay? Someone tell me what is happening," Sarah pleaded, her normally composed voice breaking with fear. Without her guide dog's steady presence and her white cane now several feet away, she was completely disoriented. 3 neighbors I had never formally met immediately surrounded Sarah. A woman in running clothes knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My name is Rebecca," she said clearly. "I live in the blue house at the corner. Your dog has been injured, but we are going to help you both. May I guide you to sit on this lawn chair while others help your dog?" Mrs. Jenkins from across the street already had her phone out. "I am calling the police right now," she announced loudly, purposely making her actions known to everyone present, including Corinne, who still stood frozen with the second rock in her hand. Her husband jogged over from their driveway. "And I am calling Mountain View Animal Hospital. They have emergency weekend services." He turned to me. "I am David Jenkins. My golden retriever sees Dr. Palmer there. They are excellent with trauma cases." The neighborhood mobilized with remarkable efficiency. Someone brought a clean blanket from their car. Another resident, an older man who introduced himself as a retired nurse, gently helped me assess Buddy's injury. "The bleeding is superficial," he explained in a calm, measured tone. "But there could be bruising to the muscle or even the ribs. He needs to be seen immediately." He spoke not just to me, but loud enough for Sarah to hear and understand. Corinne finally seemed to comprehend the gravity of what she had done. She dropped the second rock and attempted to regain control of the narrative. "That dog has been a nuisance for months," she announced to the gathered crowd. "It lunged at me just now. I was defending myself." "That is absolutely false," declared Mr. Fitzgerald, still standing in his bathrobe and slippers. "I watched the entire incident from my front window. The dog never moved toward you. It was in proper guiding position the entire time." "My doorbell camera caught everything," added another neighbor, holding up her phone. "I just reviewed the footage. It shows you throwing the rock unprovoked at a clearly marked service animal." Corinne's face drained of color as she realized multiple witnesses and at least one camera had captured her actions. She retreated several steps toward her house. "You do not understand," she called back. "That dog has been destroying property throughout the neighborhood. I have documentation." No one was listening to her anymore. The community's attention had turned entirely to Sarah and Buddy. Someone had brought a bowl of water for the dog, and gentle hands helped Sarah to a lawn chair where she could sit while maintaining contact with her injured companion. "An SUV is on the way to transport you to the animal hospital," Mrs. Jenkins informed me, covering her phone's microphone momentarily. "Mark from Willow Street is bringing his vehicle around. He has a ramp for his own elderly dog." Within minutes, a silver SUV pulled up and Mark, a middle-aged man I vaguely recognized from neighborhood gatherings, emerged. "The back is all set up with blankets," he said. "Let me help get him in." With careful movements, several neighbors helped lift Buddy onto the blankets in the back of the SUV. Despite his injury, the golden retriever maintained remarkable composure, whimpering only slightly when we touched near the wound. His training was evident even in crisis. "I need to go with him," Sarah said firmly, struggling to her feet. "Of course," I assured her, guiding her hand to my arm. "I will be with you the entire time, and Buddy will be right beside us." Mrs. Petrovich and her husband volunteered to stay at Sarah's house, retrieving her spare key from its secure location to make sure everything was locked up properly. "We will water the plants too," Mrs. Petrovich added. "Do not worry about anything here." As we settled into the SUV, Sarah with one hand firmly on Buddy's head to maintain their connection, I glimpsed police cruisers turning onto our street. Corinne still stood in her front yard, gesticulating wildly to anyone who would listen, though the crowd had thinned as people dispersed to take action rather than listen to her justifications. At the veterinary hospital, the staff responded with impressive efficiency when we explained that Buddy was a certified guide dog. They immediately took him to an examination room, allowing Sarah to maintain contact with him throughout the initial assessment. Dr. Palmer, a compassionate woman with gentle hands, narrated everything she was doing for Sarah's benefit. "I am cleaning the wound now. The bleeding has mostly stopped. I am feeling for any broken ribs or deeper injuries." After a thorough examination, she delivered her assessment. "Buddy has a significant contusion and some muscle bruising, but no broken bones or internal injuries that I can detect. He is a very lucky boy, and his training is remarkable. Most dogs would have been too distressed to examine properly." While Buddy received treatment, an officer arrived at the hospital to take statements. Officer Rodriguez was thorough and kind, particularly sensitive to Sarah's need for verbal clarity. "We have 5 witness statements already from the scene," she explained. "And one neighbor has provided clear video footage of the incident. I have to tell you, in my 15 years on the force, I have never seen such a blatant attack on a service animal." When she called me aside briefly, Officer Rodriguez shared something disturbing. "The perpetrator is claiming self-defense, saying the dog lunged at her." Her tone made clear what she thought of this defense. "But the video evidence contradicts her story completely. We are taking this very seriously. Attacking a service animal is not just animal cruelty. It carries additional penalties under state law and the Americans with Disabilities Act." As Buddy rested with medication beginning to ease his pain, Sarah sat beside him, one hand constantly touching his fur. "He did everything right," she whispered, tears finally breaking through her composed exterior. "Even when he was hurt, he tried to stay in position for me. How could anyone hurt him?" It was a question that had no satisfactory answer. But Karen would soon discover that hurting a blind woman's guide dog in front of an entire neighborhood was the beginning of her downfall. The wheels of justice moved with surprising speed. By Wednesday morning, the district attorney had filed formal charges against Karen: animal cruelty, assault on a service animal, and violation of statutes protecting assistance animals under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Each charge carried significant penalties, including potential jail time for the most serious offenses. Officer Rodriguez called to update us while Sarah and I were at the follow-up veterinary appointment. Buddy's physical wounds were healing well, though Dr. Palmer warned us to watch for signs of anxiety or behavioral changes that might indicate psychological trauma. So far, the Golden Retriever had shown remarkable resilience, already attempting to resume his guiding duties despite our insistence that he rest. "We rarely see cases this clear-cut," Officer Rodriguez explained over the phone. Between the multiple witness statements and the video evidence, her claims of self-defense fell apart immediately. The DA is taking a special interest because of the service animal aspect. News of the charges spread through Maple Hills like wildfire. The remaining HOA board members called an emergency meeting for Wednesday evening, announcing it through a neighborhood-wide email that carefully noted it would address recent incidents involving HOA leadership, without mentioning Karen by name. The Maple Hills Community Center had never been so full. Folding chairs had to be brought in from storage to accommodate the crowd that spilled into the hallway. Sarah insisted on attending despite my concerns about the stress it might cause her. With Buddy still recovering, her neighbor Thomas, whose daughter used a wheelchair, volunteered to serve as her sighted guide for the evening. "I need to be there," Sarah had said firmly that afternoon. "This is about more than just me and Buddy now. This is about what kind of community we want to be." The atmosphere in the meeting room crackled with tension and purpose. Board member Elena Martinez, who had served as vice president under both Richard and Karen, called the meeting to order with visible emotion in her voice. "We are here tonight to address an incident that has shaken our community to its core," she began, standing tall behind the podium. "The alleged attack on a certified guide dog by our HOA president represents a fundamental violation of our community values and potentially the law. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Eleanor continued, outlining the board's emergency powers to remove officers found to have engaged in misconduct. When she opened the floor for community input, neighbors lined up at the microphone. Mrs. Petrovich spoke first, her accent thicker than usual with emotion. "I have lived here 15 years. Never did I think I would see such cruelty from someone meant to represent us. Sarah and Buddy have been nothing but good neighbors. This persecution must end now." One by one, residents shared stories of Karen's increasingly oppressive rule, arbitrary violation notices, confrontational inspections, thinly veiled threats about property values. Many expressed shame at not speaking up sooner when the harassment targeted my Aunt Sarah. Thomas's daughter Lily, a 12-year-old who navigated the world in her wheelchair, spoke with remarkable poise. "When you target someone for being different or needing accommodations, you make the world smaller for all of us. What happened to Buddy could happen to any assistance device any of us rely on." Midway through the testimonials, Karen herself entered the room. The sudden hush was deafening. Her usual confident stride had been replaced by a defensive rigidity. She clutched a leather portfolio and wore the same HOA polo shirt, as if the uniform might still lend her authority. "This meeting is procedurally improper," she announced, walking toward the front. "As president, I should have been consulted before." "You have been charged with a crime, Patricia," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "The bylaws are clear that in such circumstances, you are temporarily relieved of duties pending resolution." Karen attempted to speak again, but the room had turned against her completely. Where once her clipboard had inspired fear, now it elicited contempt. Several residents stood and turned their backs to her in silent protest. Eleanor Martinez then unveiled the community's response, a defense fund for Sarah and Buddy, to cover both veterinary expenses and legal costs should they be needed. "We have already collected over $3,000, she announced to applause. "And Thomas has volunteered to coordinate support services to ensure Sarah has assistance while Buddy recovers." Karen's face flushed with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. She attempted one final time to regain control. "These allegations are completely unfounded. My record as HOA president speaks for itself. I have maintained standards that preserve our property values and community aesthetics." Her words fell on deaf ears. The community had seen her true nature revealed in one moment of unrestrained cruelty, and no amount of procedural objections could erase that image. When the board voted unanimously to remove her as president pending resolution of the criminal charges, scattered applause broke out. As Karen fled the meeting, shoulders rigid with humiliation, a local news van was pulling into the community center parking lot. The reporter's solemn expression as she prepared her notes suggested she understood the gravity of covering allegations of targeted harassment culminating in violence against a disabled woman's guide dog. The community that had once cowered under Karen's clipboard now stood united, forming a protective circle around my Aunt Sarah. Thomas guided her home after the meeting, neighbors stopping to offer support along the way. For the first time since Karen's reign of HOA terror had begun, Sarah smiled without reservation, feeling the genuine warmth of community replacing the isolation Karen had tried to impose. "Sometimes," Sarah reflected as we sat on her porch that evening, "it takes something terrible to remind people what really matters." The courtroom sat hushed as Karen stood before Judge Amelia Watkins 3 months after the rock incident. Gone were the HOA polo shirt and clipboard that had been her armor. Instead, She wore a conservative gray suit that seemed to hang loosely on her frame, as if the stress of legal proceedings had physically diminished her. Sarah sat in the front row with Buddy at her feet, the golden retriever fully recovered and back to his guiding duties. The prosecutor had prepared Sarah thoroughly for the impact statement she would deliver, though nothing could fully prepare anyone for the emotional weight of the moment. Judge Watkins reviewed the charges, evidence, and Corinne's eventual guilty plea, a decision made after her attorney reviewed the overwhelming witness testimonies and video evidence. The plea agreement spared her jail time but carried other significant consequences. "Ms. Wilkinson," Judge Watkins addressed Corinne directly, "your actions reflect a disturbing pattern of discrimination and cruelty that culminated in violence against a service animal performing its duties. This court takes such behavior extremely seriously." Corinne kept her gaze fixed on the floor as the judge announced the penalties. A substantial fine of $5,000, $200 hours of community service, specifically at an animal shelter, mandatory completion of an anti-discrimination education program, and a permanent restraining order requiring her to maintain a distance of at least 100 feet from both Sarah and Buddy. When Sarah was invited to speak, Thomas guided her to the podium. She stood tall, her unseeing eyes directed toward the sound of Corinne's breathing. "Buddy gave me back my independence when I lost my sight," Sarah began, her voice steady and clear. "Each morning, he guides me through a world of darkness with unwavering loyalty and skill. When you attacked him, you did not just hurt an animal, you attempted to sever my connection to the world around me. You tried to take my freedom." The courtroom remained silent as Sarah continued, explaining how the attack had temporarily robbed her of mobility, security, and community connection. "But something unexpected happened," she added. "The community that had been silent found its voice. The neighbors who had looked away stepped forward. In trying to isolate me, you actually brought us all closer together." Back in Maple Hills, the transformation continued long after the court proceedings concluded. The HOA underwent complete reconstitution, with Alina Martinez elected as president on a platform of inclusive community standards. The new board's first action was creating a position for disability advocacy, filled by Thomas, whose experience with his daughter gave him valuable perspective. Corinne listed her house for sale the week after the court hearing. Neighbors observed the moving truck with quiet satisfaction, though no one engaged in overt celebration. Sarah had specifically requested dignity rather than triumphalism in the community's response. Spring arrived with renewal both literal and symbolic. The neighborhood organized a Service Animal Appreciation Day on the community green, with Sarah as the guest of honor.